Okay, then let me start by saying good afternoon to all of you and welcome to our instruction course on how to diagnose and manage the post-cataract surgery ocular edema. So cataract surgery in today's scenario is offering more of a refractive outcome. And in that situation, if anything goes amiss, it becomes a psychological stress both for the surgeon and the patient. So how to mend the inadvertent outcomes and offer a reasonable final vision to the patient is the aim of this instruction course. I'll just share my screen. Okay, I think there is some issues. Okay, then I take immense pleasure in introducing my esteemed co-instructors. And as we have already mentioned, there is a change in the serial. Dr. Rupak Roy having another IC in another hall. So I will call him first. He is the well-known face in the retinal world, and he is the retinal surgeon from Shankar Netralaya, Kolkata, and he will give us tips on how to handle retinal edema. So, Dr. Rupak Roy, please, with your talk.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Rupak, you are audible.
Switch on your camera also, please.
Are my slides visible?
Yes,
sir, you're audible and visible both.
Make it a slideshow.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Shomana and AIOC for this opportunity to present in this instruction course. I'll be speaking on pseudophakic macular edema. So cystoid macular edema or pseudophakic cystoid macular edema is an important post-operative complication of cataract surgery. It compromises the result of a good cataract surgery and apparently uneventful, uncomplicated cataract surgery. Can occur even after uneventful cataract surgery, but the incidence rapidly increases after complicated cataract surgeries. So CME is a primary cause of reduced vision following both cataract and vitreoretinal surgeries. So if you see the overall incidence in Indian patients, you see clinical CME of around 2% in uncomplicated cataract surgeries, and if you see the angiographic CME rates, it's around 20%. And if you see the same incidence in patients without diabetic retinopathy, it's around 47%, and with diabetic retinopathy, it goes up to around 55%. So about half of patients with diabetic retinopathy is prone to develop pseudophakic macular edema after cataract surgeries. So the pathophysiology is basically inflammation due to surgical manipulation, and it is the major cause of the cystoid macular edema. The CME can be divided into two parts. One is the angiographic CME, which is defined by presence of fluorescein leakage and detected by fluorescein angiogram, and clinical CME when patients come with a decreased vision and diagnosed by biomicroscopic examination. Angiographic CME is more common than clinical CME, but we have to understand that most of the patients of angiographic CME are asymptomatic. This is classified into 4 levels. Level 1 is edema less than 360° perifoveal. Level 2 is minimal, but 360° perifoveal edema is seen. Level 3 is moderate or perifoveal edema. Level 4 is severe 360° perifoveal edema. So if you want to classify CME, you will see acute CME appears within 4 months of surgery. Late onset occurs after than 4 months post-operatively, and chronic CME which lasts more than 6 months. So what are the symptoms? Decrease in visual acuity is the commonest symptom. Loss of contrast, sensitivity and color vision is also complained by patients. Metamorphopsia is a type of a distorted visions, can also be seen following cystoid macular edema. The signs are clinically significant foveal edema and retinal thickening more than 300 micron, seen as a loss of the foveal reflex. It can be seen both in slit lamp biomicroscopy or direct or indirect ophthalmoscopy, but slit lamp biomicroscopy is the most sensitive indicator for detection of pseudophakic macular edema. Subclinical foveal edema is described as edema less than 300 micron, and it can be sometimes, because it is an inflammatory condition, it can be sometimes associated with vitritis and optic nerve head swelling. The risk factors of CME are systemic diseases, pre-existing ocular conditions, and intraoperative complications. Identifying the risk factors for CME is crucial for prevention and adequate treatment. So what are the risk factors? Diabetes mellitus promotes the development of CME even in the absence of diabetic retinopathy. And systemic hypertension increases the incidence. Furthermore, it is a risk factor for retinal vein occlusion, which promotes development of CME. The ocular conditions that can predispose to CME are retinal vein occlusion, glaucoma, vitreoretinal interface changes such as epiretinal membranes, and uveitis. The risk factors for intraoperative complications are posterior capsular rupture, vitreous loss, incarcerated vitreous in the incision, cortical remnants in the vitreous, trauma to the iris, intraocular lens dislocation, premature posterior capsulotomy, and iris fixation or anterior fixated IOLs. So these are all the complicated situations in which the patients are very much predisposed to formation of a cystoid macular edema post-surgery. But diabetes is one of the most important risk factors for development of CME. The incidence of CME is about 2.54 times increase in patients with diabetes as compared to patients without diabetes. Now, the diagnosis of CME can be done clinically by imaging techniques like color fundus photography, fluorescein angiography, optical coherence tomography, functional and testing like electrophysiology, autofluorescence, and retinal thickness analyzer. But in a clinical setting, what we need to do is OCT. Fluorescein angiography is indicated when you want to differentiate a pseudophakic CME in a case of retinal vein occlusion or in the background of a diabetic retinopathy. So if a patient of diabetic retinopathy after cataract surgery develops a cystoid macular edema, one can do an fundus fluorescein angiography to differentiate whether it is a pseudophakic CME or it's a diabetic macular edema. In a pseudophakic CME, you will get disc staining. On the other hand, in a diabetic macular edema, the disc will be cold or no staining. But for a routine practice, an optical coherence tomography will suffice. So this is a color fundus photograph showing a cystoid macular edema, and the fundus fluorescein angiography of the left place showing a petaloid leakage surgery of cystoid macular edema. This is a classic OCT of a patient with pseudophakic CME. You can see the nuclear layers are ripe with cysts. So this is a classic presentation of a cystoid macular edema. Coming to the management of CME, prophylaxis is the most important step. Prevention, try to do an atraumatic surgery. Surgical complications are not in the hands of surgeons. Always, in the best of hands, we can have complications. Even if we have complications, manage the complications wise so that the predisposing events are cut off. Surgery, if the patient is not responding to medical therapy, we go for surgery. Also, if there is presence of vitreomacular traction in OCT, surgery is needed. But first line therapy is medical therapy with non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, corticosteroids, and carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. Prophylaxis is the most important part. So prophylaxis must be considered, especially for patients with risk factors like diabetes, uveitis, venous retinal occlusions, intraoperative complications like posterior capsular rupture, cardiovascular diseases. So patients with uveitis, diabetes, retinal vein occlusion, whenever they are planned for cataract surgery, it is a good idea to start an NSAID 7 days prior to surgery and continue that NSAID at least 1 month post-surgery, even if the patient is asymptomatic and the patient does not have any CME. Treatment strategy is basically inhibition of the inflammatory cascade. Despite newer cataract surgical techniques, management of CME still remains a therapeutic challenge. inhibiting the inflammatory cascade is a core strategy for CME risk reduction. Topical NSAIDs and corticosteroids are the first-line modalities. I personally prefer giving topical NSAIDs for at least 2 months before switching over to corticosteroids or any other form of treatment. If the patient has a CME, you start with patient with a Nepafenac, and you observe the patient for 2 months. Most of the time the CME will resolve. If the patient's CME is not resolving after using NSAIDs, we can step up the therapy. Step up the therapy can be in like using a corticosteroids, which can be used in a topical method, or best it can be used in a subtenon or an intravitreal injection. So intravitreal injection is preferred because there is always a higher risk of glaucoma with the subtenon depot injection. So the first line therapy of pseudophakic macular edema is NSAIDs. If the NSAIDs does not work for at least 2 months, then you switch over to corticosteroids, preferably an intravitreal formulation. Anti-VEGF agents does not have much of a role in pseudophakic CME because this is mainly an inflammatory condition. And pharmacological vitreolysis agents are not available in India. But if the patient shows vitreomacular traction on OCT, do consider vitrectomy. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Rupak Roy. Thank you so much for giving this wonderful talk. Now, let me, you have another talk, I believe. So thank you for giving us the time. Thanks. So now I invite Dr. Purban Ganguly, the brave young oculoplastic surgeon, who will give us tips on how to handle the adnexal edema. Please, Purban.
Thank you, madam. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah,
Hello?
perfectly.
Okay. So I'll be talking about adnexal edema. Thank you, Dr. Sumana Chatterjee and AIOC for giving me this wonderful opportunity. So water everywhere. Now what happens when this water is coming to the ocular adnexa? Warm greetings from Arayo, Kolkata. Water is life only when it remains at the right place and at the right time. So our preoperative state of mind is whether the IOP is controlled. Did the patient stop the anticoagulants? What kind of iris I'm dealing with? Will it become floppy? If the pupil is small, will I be using an expander? Is it a hard or a soft cataract? Will my biometry be accurate? So these are the thoughts that usually come before we go in for a cataract surgery. But who are the stepsons of the cataract surgery? The eyelid, the orbit, and obviously the sac. So when after the cataract surgery, we find that this adnexa has become swollen, we become that the repentant remorse comes to us. Where did we go wrong? Now the Sherlock Holmes investigates why the water came. Now, possible causes of adnexal edema after cataract surgery may be related to the surgery, may be unrelated to surgery, and both may be infective or non-infective. So let us first come to the causes related to the surgery, which are non-infective causes, which is block related. The peribulbar block, peribulbar block causing a retrobulbar hemorrhage or a subtenon block, and allergic reaction to the drugs. Mostly the non-infective block related cases are due to injury, too much block, subperiosteal hemorrhage. The medial wall of the orbit has been damaged. And obviously there are reported cases where while the peribulbar or the subtenon block, the skin flora has been incorporated post-septally into the orbit. So the non-infective cases, the most important is retrobulbar hemorrhage. Retrobulbar hemorrhage can be mostly traumatic while giving the block. And we all know it can be managed conservatively once we have detected that there is a retrobulbar hemorrhage, and the conservative management includes putting on pressure, doing an indirect ophthalmoscopy to find whether there is any perforation, blood pressure and anticoagulants needs to be controlled, ice packs, and so on and so forth. If the conservative management fails, the most important thing that all anterior segment surgeons, posterior segment surgeons can do is a lateral canthotomy with an inferior cantholysis. And because lateral canthotomy we need to do for retrobulbar hemorrhage is because we have it becomes a compartment. There's a compartment syndrome that is happening. The blood is accumulating in the central space and it cannot go out. The orbit becomes tight and there is a compression of the optic nerve. There is retinal ischemia and the vision drops. So what are the primary indications? There is decreased vision. The vision is deteriorating very fast. There is increasing proptosis. The intraocular pressure is high. There are retinal changes that you are seeing. So in those cases, you need to go in for a lateral canthotomy. But before doing a lateral canthotomy, an indirect ophthalmoscopy to see the periphery is very urgent, because if there is a perforation, then lateral canthotomy versus perforation is a debatable thing to do. But the basic process of doing lateral canthotomy is put in a local lignocaine infiltration. And before putting your scissors with a mosquito forceps, you just give pressure on the canthal tendon. This will do the hemostasis and you will have a bloodless lateral canthotomy. And just release the lateral canthal tendon and you will find that there will be some reduction of the proptosis and the acute rise in the intraorbital pressure will come down. Let us come to the non-infective causes. That is the allergic reaction. One important thing is that the hyaluronidase is known to cause allergic reaction after putting in a block, and the risk factor is too much of hyaluronidase. Only 15 units per ml is the recommended dose by the British National Formulary. But another important fact is that a pre-existing pseudotumor, there is some kind of an interaction with hyaluronidase enzyme with the pseudotumor condition in the orbital apex, which can flare up. It is usually treated with the Phenergan injection and steroids, both topical and oral. There's infective causes related to surgeries, acute postoperative endophthalmitis and panophthalmitis, which will be dealt later on. Let us come to the unrelated infective causes. It may be a flare of a pre-existing infective foci that we have forgot to detect, or it may be a flare-up of a non-infective orbitopathy. The infective foci, lacrimal sac, canaliculi, blepharitis, which can lead to preseptal orbital cellulitis, and if not detected about the overlooked nuisance, it can cross the septum and can turn fatal. That is orbital cellulitis. Pre-existing non-infective causes, thyroid orbitopathy, pseudotumor. It is always advisable to do a cataract surgery for thyroid orbitopathy in the quiescent stage. If there is a pseudotumor, be cautious that the pseudotumor is controlled. Arteriovenous fistulas, vascular and lymphoid tumors, whether to treat the tumor first or the cataract first will depend on a mutual communication between the orbit surgeon and the anterior segment surgeon. And neuroimaging has got an important role in ambiguous cases. So the take-home message is that proper past history is important for non-surgical, non-infective cases. Whenever we are in a doubt with the clinical history, please go in for neuroimaging. Pre-operative ocular adnexal clinical audit to look at the ocular adnexa and look for infective foci is very important. Again, shifting to topical anesthesia is safer to avoid block-related orbitopathies. And lateral canthotomy can be performed anywhere by any ophthalmologist if you have an inadvertent retrobulbar hemorrhage. So sometimes to prevent ocular adnexal tumors, it is always better to prevent such occurrence rather than to cure it. And lastly, I would say for both anterior segment and posterior segment surgeons, the ocular adnexa is like a stepson. But sometimes looking at your stepsons are useful if you want to have a clean postoperative outcome.